I'm Joe Condon. Welcome to our program. This week we're going to talk about the Boy Scouts of America. And here to tell us about the Boy Scouts and what they're up to these days is Richard Stockton. Richard is the Chief Executive Officer of the Twin Rivers Council of the Boy Scouts of America. You serve 13 lucky counties in New York State, and you serve 11,000 youth in New York State and 6,000 registered adult volunteers. You're in charge of about 20,000 people.
Yeah, it's at times can be overwhelming, but I worry about the daily stuff. What can I do to help make our volunteers, those 6,000 adult leaders, what can I do to help make their jobs better? They're the ones that are actually delivering the program of scouting, and that's what our job is to support them.
Before going on the air today, we were talking about the origins of the Boy Scouts, and a lot of people didn't realize, and I didn't realize it, it started in foggy London.
It did start in foggy London. A publisher in Chicago, Mr. Boyce, was on a business trip in London, and he got lost in the fog. This is back in 1908, 1909, where there was lots of fog and things still in London at that time. He got lost. He was trying to find an address. A young man came up, asked him if he needed help. He showed him the address. The young man took him to the location, and as was custom, and would probably be custom now, he offered to give him a tip for helping him get to this address. He said, "Oh no, I can't take that. I was doing my good deed. I'm a scout," and walked away into the fog. He's ever since been known as the Unknown Scout, and Mr. Boyce was extremely impressed by this, and so the next day he tried to find out more about scouting and found the founder of the Boy Scouts. His name was Lord Baden-Powell, who's a famous general in England who had wrote a book. He talked to him and came back to the United States and started scouting in the United States. So.
How did the Lord come up with the concept of scouting? What made him do that?
He was a infantry general in the Boer Wars. This is in South Africa, and his job was to teach what we would call scouting in the military, teaching them how to be scouts, how to stay low and do camouflage and be able to cook on the side and be able to live in the outdoors by yourself. And he wrote a book about scouting. Didn't know it. It was meant for the military. It got back to London. It was then produced, and a whole bunch of kids got a hold of it. And kids got a hold of this book and started reading about how to do things in the outdoors and all these cool things that they could do in camping. Lord Baden-Powell then came back from the Boer Wars. He was a big hero. After winning a major battle, came back, found out that all these kids were reading his book, and so he rewrote the book called Scouting for Boys and started an entire program, tested it, did a lot of things nowadays that you would do with a program, and ended up creating the World Boy Scout Organization, and then it obviously matriculated all over the British Empire and English-speaking part of the world to start with. Ended up in the United States in the 1908, 1909 time frame, and grew from there.
Well, when William Boyce brought it to the United States, it became so successful that it took off, and Congress eventually chartered it. But talk about that a little.
Correct. So what happened is you had a lot of different smaller organizations around the United States that were doing some of this outdoor activity kinds of things. And what ended up happening is they all got together. Daniel Carter Beard, Boyce, all got together, and they decided that they would test scouting, have a big summer camp kind of rendezvous, and they would test that. So what they ended up doing is they actually tested it here in this council. They tested it at Silver Bay up on Lake George. They had a large encampment. They tested how scouting worked and would it do what they wanted, which was to help build character in boys. I found out that it worked great. The outdoors was a wonderful, fantastic place to do scouting, and a place to do experiments, and a place to learn. It was the best classroom they had ever found, and so they ended up incorporating scouting. Actually, the Scouts were actually owned and operated by the YMCA to start with. The YMCA then saw that it was going to become large and more than they wanted. It wasn't their core program, so they spun it off into its own corporation, nonprofit. They hired a lawyer from Washington, D.C., a man named James West, who became the first what they call chief scout executive, and went to Congress. And at the time, Teddy Roosevelt helped them, who was very big into scouting his entire life, and they got a congressional charter to operate the Boy Scouts of America.
Now, I remember when I became a scout, I was in St. Patrick's Parish in Albany, and they had Cub Scout Pack 25. And then when I was done with the Cub Scouts, I joined the Boy Scouts. I don't really remember why I joined the Cub Scouts, except that my parents I assume had a very high regard for it, but I ended up loving it. Why do you think kids today should get involved in scouting?
Because scouting is one of those places where we let, truly at a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout age, we let boys be boys. We'll let them, and some moms will cringe when I say this, we'll let them get dirty. We'll let them do some things in the outdoors. We teach them how to cook on a fire. We still let them make fires. We still teach them the proper way to do bows and arrows. We still teach them about being in the outdoors. And that's, we use the outdoors as the hook of, look at all these great things they get to do. Young men, young boys, they still want to do that stuff. They still enjoy the outdoors. And then through our programs, we work on physical fitness and character building and leadership and becoming that better citizen, which is in the long run what we're really trying to create is better citizens.
Well, when kids become involved with Cub Scouts, what are some of the Cub Scout programs that, and first of all, what is the age of a Cub Scout?
Okay, a Cub Scout is a first grader through a fifth grader.
Okay.
And they progress each year. They go through a different program. They start as a tiger cub as a first grader, and then they become a wolf, and then a bear, and then what we call a Weeblo, which stands for We Be Loyal Scouts. So there's actually terminology to this. And they have different adventures, and they do things. Obviously, as a tiger cub, they do more things with their family, and their family's very involved and works with them, and they learn about the family, they learn about the community, and then the more they move up as a wolf, they learn more about not just their family, but maybe their neighborhood, and a little more than their neighborhood. So it's all age appropriate. It all is concentrically grows, so that by the time you end up in the Boy Scouts, which is somebody who's sixth grade through pretty much a senior in high school, age 11 to 18 is Boy Scouting, is they're working on things like environmental science and world citizenship, and they're learning about their own personal finances. So it's a program that grows with the young man, and in the long run ends up with hopefully an Eagle Scout, or at least a Scout who's been in the program long enough that they've truly learned enough that it's changed their life.
Obviously, it was a long time ago, but I remember Cub Scouts being more of an indoor program, and then when I became a Boy Scout, we started doing more things outside, hiking, campouts, and...
Yeah, you could look at it that way, I guess. Our Cub Scouts...
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, our Cub Scouts do lots of tours. They do lots of fun things on their own outdoors. Obviously, Cub Scouts, for the most part, meets during the school year, so there is more winter months in there. Okay. We're now coming into the winter months, and they'll do more craft projects and more tours. We're coming into what we call, lovingly, the Pinewood Derby season. They'll all be creating their Pinewood Derby car and working with their parent or significant other or an older brother or somebody in their neighborhood to get their car made, and they'll be racing those as packs. And
is that sort of like Soapbox Derby?
Yeah, but Pinewood Derbies are about this big.
Oh, okay.
And there are lots of rules on what they do, and they run down a track and run against each other, and they run against their friends. It really is really one of the more fun parts of the Cub Scout program. They get to do that every year, and so they progress. They get better. Some of these cars are amazing that these kids make and that they work with. And the point of Cub Scouting is that you have a young man working hopefully with a mentor in some way. Hopefully that's a parent. It doesn't always have to be a parent. Sometimes it's a grandparent. Sometimes it's an older brother. Sometimes it's the friend down the street. It's a mom. But they work with somebody, and they get that adult attachment, and they work together. And the longer you go in scouting, there's always that adult mentor there, but more and more as you go in the program, the farther you get where you get to make some of your own decisions. So eventually in a Boy Scout troop, we have what we call the boy-led unit, where what we call the senior patrol leader, the head boy, and his group of officers make a lot of the decisions for the unit, up to our venturing program, which is 14 to 20-year-old, boy and girl. So it's a co-ed program where those kids make all their own decisions. The the leaders at that time are not Cub Masters and Scout Masters, they're advisors, and their job is just to make sure they don't get too far, off the rails, but they're allowed to make some decisions, they're allowed to do the things that they need to do so that they can grow and have a good time.
What exactly happens with the venturing program? I was just going to ask you about it since you brought it up.
Venturing is a lot of different things. For the most part, venturing is a co-ed program, boys, girls, 14 to 20. They're usually centered around something that they're interested in. So being that we're the Scouts, they're a lot of times interested in high adventure, outdoor kinds of activities. But at the same time, there are units in the United States I know of. I have a very good friend who's in a unit that his daughter is in, and they started as a shopping group, and what they learned is they learned not just shopping, they learned investing, they learned how to use money. And their big activity every year is they would go to New York City for a big like shopping excursion, but it was all based on things that they had learned and small boutiques and research and all these kinds of things that they learned locally, and then they would go put all of that research into being later in a trip to New York City. I've had other ones that do sailing and backpacking. The ones that happen the most are outdoor activity ones, though, that go out in the outdoors.
What is the Scout Exploring program about?
Okay, Scout Exploring, same thing. That's 14 to 20-year-olds, boys and girls. Again, it's another co-ed program, but it's based around jobs. So our most popular Scout Exploring posts are Police Explorer posts and Fire Explorer posts. These are ran by local police departments, sheriffs, fire departments, and what the kids get to learn is they get to see what it's like to be a fireman, what it's like to be a policeman. We have a very, very popular program at one of the medical centers where they get to go to a different part of the hospital every month and learn about that part of the hospital. And so what's great about exploring is it's a way to get their feet wet in a career before they actually start taking courses or make a life decision. They can actually see, maybe the sight of blood, maybe I shouldn't be a nurse, maybe I can't, or maybe I'm really interested in CSI, or I'd really like to be a paramedic, and they get to try that out and see what it's really like before they get too far along. So it's very career-based, very popular. We would love to start, and we have kids who want every kind of business and a profession you can think of: law, sales, beauticians, theater. We just need adults and organizations who'd like to have a youth group, see what they do. Give us a call at our office and let any Scout office know, and they can help you set up an Explore post. There's so much demand, we can't meet the demand.
What is your Learning for Life program?
Learning for Life is an in-school program, and it is...
What ages?
Ages is kindergarten through 12th grade. Okay. So it's an entire in-school program. It's ran by teachers. It's not ran by our volunteers, and it is curriculum based. So they have full curriculum books, and they're in the school, and so they learn everything from personal safety to how to be polite to older. They learn resume building and how to balance a checkbook, and so it's life skills based throughout an entire school age group, and it's again it's tailor-made for each age group.